On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse Q&A, we talk with narcissistic abuse recovery coach Elizabeth Barre about recognizing the signs of covert narcissists and how to get them to show their true selves before it's too late. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse Q&A. I am Brandon Chadwick, and this is a podcast that interviews mental health professionals, lawyers, researchers, and authors about narcissistic and domestic abuse. And before we get into our episode, let me state that this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please do not substitute this show for medical advice. If you are struggling, please do reach out to the current professional you use or contact your local domestic abuse agency. Speaking of professionals, we just started our own directory of mental health professionals at abusetherapy.org. So if you are looking for someone to talk to, please do go to abusetherapy.org. Using one of our professionals from our directory helps support the show. We'll be adding as many diverse professionals as we can, and if you're a professional looking to be part of our directory, please do email me at directory@abusetherapy.org. And before I get out of my own way and your way and start the show, thank you to everyone who has come by our website at narcissistapocalypse.com and filled out an application form to be on our sister podcast, Not Narcissist Apocalypse Survivor Stories. If you have not received an email from me, please do check your junk mail. And now it's time for the show. Here is my interview with Elizabeth Barre. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse Q&A. With me today, I have Elizabeth Barre. How are you?
I'm doing as well as could be expected.
All right. So you are a relationship coach that specializes in narcissistic abuse and toxic relationships. You are an online coach worldwide and in person in London, England, but not for now. But when this is all over, you will be. Mm-hmm. And people can reach you at elizabethbarrecoaching.com. I will have that in the description so everyone knows how to spell it. And your Instagram is elizabethbarre_coaching. You have a background in transpersonal psychology, yoga, and spirituality. And today we are going to talk about covert narcissists and narcissism. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. So I guess the first part that everyone wants to know about a covert narcissist is how to recognize them. So let's discuss the subtle difference between a grandiose narcissist and a covert narcissist. As, sometimes they share some of the same traits, but then there are the parts of the covert narcissist where we don't really see what's going on underneath. So let's break it down.
Yeah, so the DSM definition of narcissistic personality disorder generally covers the sort of grandiose and what we call overt narcissist, where the signs are fairly obvious to kind of tease out. And, it really has to do, it's very sort of lived on the outside. And they're more obvious and recognizable as narcissists. And so in a way, they're a little bit easier to steer clear of if you know what you're looking for. The covert type or the vulnerable type is a type that's not really covered in the DSM by definition. So a lot of therapists actually can still miss it. And this is because they often show up as victim, and they can be mistaken for a BPD diagnosis, and there's also overlap with that, or as maybe a classic codependent type. But what the covert narcissist shares with the overt narcissist is a lack of empathy for their targets.
And I guess one of the things when it comes to covert narcissists and people who have been abused by narcissists, when a lot of people say to themselves, am I the narcissist? Maybe, in their mind, am I the one playing the victim here? That they might be confusing themselves with someone who is an actual covert narcissist instead of actually being the victim, because maybe the similarities between what is going on with the victim and their abuser, that there are more similarities when it comes to this type of narcissist. So it becomes a little bit more confusing. And then especially when it comes to being a victim, when a narcissist says to you, stop playing the victim, there's a little bit of truth possibly in those things. And that's what they look for. And for you to kind of grab hold to and to confuse you. So,
so this vulnerable type, like, they might have genuine victim experiences, but the thing is that they're very super manipulative about their victimhood. It's sort of like their main access to getting supply is through this identity of victimhood, and that's how they are manipulating people to get access to resources. So like your physical resources, like your housing or your money. And also in a very big way, like your emotional resources, because they're sort of the classic, like, energetic vampire.
And we all hate vampires now, don't we?
Sure.
Well, some people do like them. I do like them, but only in the movies.
Only in literature, right?
Yeah.
But like this type of energy vampire, it's really like they're forcing their emotional state on others. So they're making everyone around them comply and participate in what their emotional state is. And then they're blaming and villainizing people who don't show up to rescue or enable them after. So it's definitely a really tricky game that they're running.
So let's go through about 10 signs of recognizing a covert narcissist, and we'll talk. Some will go into detail about, some we won't. Some of them might be just self-explanatory.
Right.
So let's start off with number 1, soulmate phase, aka the love kind of bombing phase of a covert narcissist.
Yeah. So I mean, the classic, right? It's the first phase with every narcissist. Even if they're not like this grandiose overt type, there's going to be a phase where it's super intense and they're really just trying to draw you in. They often are using your natural empathy in order to do this. And, it could be through pity party and guilt trips and just kind of bids to make you rescue them. And if it's a romantic relationship situation, they are going to want to commit kind of way too early than what might be just sort of like the normative. So the timeline of commitment is moving really, really fast, and they're falling in love with great intensity. And often people feel intuitively like this is not quite right, but because the warmth of this type of narcissist is so intense in this early phase, we tend to fall for it.
And you said something there, which is something's not quite right, which gets us into the next one, which something feels off. And, and I guess that could also be, this would bring us into, trust your gut. It's something is ignored. This is where the trust your gut is ignored by a lot of people. So something feels off. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So, some people who are getting drawn in by this type of narcissist, if they're sort of healthy and they're not codependent, then that's the point at which they're kind of like, you know what? This is moving too fast. It's a little weird. Like, you're too intense. And they just sort of, let the relationship situation maybe come to a confrontation, and then it goes away. They just somehow deflect it. But if you're kind of more on the codependent side, then you're more likely to, you might still feel the signs intuitively. You might feel that something is off, but you're actually likely to be like, you know what, this actually feels really good. And I'm really enjoying the attention. And just because something feels off, I'm still going to run with it and let it go further, because that's what we like as codependents.
And that could also be things that are off, or that person's behavior, is not something I've seen before.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely have sort of physical cues that are a bit different from normative people. So, that's sort of like not feeling like you're fully connected to the person. They don't like make eye contact with you, or they have like little escape mechanisms in conversation. You don't feel like they fully see you or empathize with you, but they're more focused on their own story. That can be a real clue.
And the next one we have on our list here is cognitive dissonance. So can you kind of define that for people that don't understand what that is?
So cognitive dissonance is when your actions and then what you're communicating or thinking is not exactly aligned. So it's a real like inner conflict within that individual.
So this could be, for example, could that is something along the lines of, I'm an altruistic, nice type of person, but then you're walking down the street and there's a homeless person maybe there, and instead of giving them money, they might say, "Why doesn't that guy get a job?"
Right. They want to have the image of being a really empathetic person. They might even identify as an empath and like be really intense about that, but then their actual actions are not compassionate at all.
And a lot of the time, again, when it comes to trusting your gut and going back to number 2, something feels off with cognitive dissonance. It's something people ignore a lot. They're just, they kind, in my mind, when I'm thinking of it, when I get confused, I tilt my head like a dog, like when a dog is confused, it'd be like, what was that? And I'm sure a lot of people who are going through cognitive dissonance have the exact same kind of feeling where they kind of tilt their head and they're curious. It's kind of like a curiosity. What was that? They know their mind says something. They have put two and two together, but because I guess of the love bombing stage, that again, trusting your gut kind of falls away here.
I'm actually reminded of a scenario where a certain person that I knew who was really strongly identifying as a healer and as an empath, to witness this person's behavior in a restaurant was really interesting, because the way that they were treating the wait staff was just shocking, super entitled, and really, really mean and rude and condescending, but yet they have this identity as this healer that's spreading light everywhere. So it's really interesting.
Well, we'll get into ways of how to kind of test the waters to see if you do have a partner before these things start actually happening and you start getting further into a relationship, because I started thinking that's a great way, like a couple of ways. How does someone treat a dog when you're not looking? Mm-hmm. And how does someone treat a wait staff when you might be looking or might not be paying attention? Or if you are, they just forget that you're there.
Yeah, they show you who they truly are, which is a very self-absorbed and very entitled person, actually.
So up next, we have on our list justifying bad behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean that is really tied up in the victim identity. So the victim identity is like a true power card. As long as you stay in the place of victim, then it's like you have a free pass to do anything that is not quite in integrity, right? So I know an example we were thinking about is just like the serial cheater who then never takes accountability, and they always have a good reason. Like, yeah, but you're not treating me the exact way that I want to be treated, even though I never communicated to you that anything was wrong, but yet I'm still entitled to have this cheating behavior. And you are not allowed to question that, right?
So up next, we have disproportionate rage. And I guess this is an interesting one because for the most part, you're seeing someone on their best behavior. And then one day this happens. So can you go into this a little bit further about maybe what causes that rage as well?
Sure. I mean, it's anything that challenges their concept of self. All narcissists, both overt and covert types, have what we call the narcissistic rage, which is generally like a really shocking flip of the mask where you may not have even known that you perpetrated in some way. It might have seemed really innocuous or really innocent, but if they perceive that you challenge their self-image or their concept of self, it just sets them off, and it's really crazy, and it can be really scary. I don't think that all narcissists do this. There's some like cerebral types that have a very cooled and collective, sort of way of handling communications with you, but all of them will engage in punishment. They still feel the rage. They may not explode every time, but they'll absolutely engage in punishing behaviors. And that can be a way that the rage is expressed. If that makes sense.
Yeah. To me, when you have disproportionate rage, the opposite of rage is to become silent. And when you hear a lot of people that get the silent treatment to another degree, extreme silent treatments, to me, that would be a disproportionate type thing where why is this person not communicating with me? And along the lines of what you're saying there, that's a way that someone might be raging, but it's done internally and it's accomplishing the same thing.
Yeah. It's hot anger versus cold anger,
And up next, we have one of the best, gaslighting.
Oh, yes, one of the best. I mean, this is like one of the classics. It's one of the main tools in the tool belt for all types of narcissists. So whenever they're feeling like they don't want to be present in a situation, or they don't want to meet you in an equal way in a conversation, they use gaslighting in order to absolve themselves of having to act with integrity. So it's used in all kinds of situations. It's used in those classic situations where you are having like a real important confrontation with them, like on cheating or on money or something like that. But I also find that a lot of them just do it recreationally, that it's just a way that they actually really like interacting with people and they like showing up. They like to sow confusion, and they like to kind of play with people's sense of reality because it gives them a sense of control over others.
It's really sick.
Yeah, it's really a sad thing, and it's super destructive to the people that are targeted by it.
But guess what? They don't care. Do you know why? Because they have the next one on the list, a lack of empathy. How is that segue? That was the best segue I have ever done.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I mean, the lack of empathy is the hallmark. When a lot of people get in touch with me in my coaching practice and they say that they just want to know if their partner is the narcissist, or maybe it's possible that they're doing something that's causing the behavior. And I always ask them, it always comes back to, do they lack empathy for you? And to me, narcissist or otherwise, if you're in a toxic relationship, that person is not going to be able to empathize with you. They don't see you for who you are. And they don't care about how you feel, basically.
And the next one on our list is black and white perceptions. Can you explain that a bit?
Well, so yeah, this is kind of like it kind of speaks to like the tumultuous inner condition of the narcissist. So we talked about how they kind of like trend like really quickly in really extreme way between like putting you on a pedestal or completely tearing you down, and they're upset and they hate you. And there's no like in between space. So you're either like the perfect idealized partner that's being love bombed, or you're nothing and you never made them happy. There's literally nowhere in between.
I guess there's, no in between, and also no rational, I don't even know what I'm saying, no rational thought process of how to, I guess, cope or deal with things that upset them. So is that why, there's a black and white, because the lack of coping mechanisms, probably?
Absolutely. So with the vulnerable covert type, there is some overlap into borderline personality disorder. And this is one of those areas where that really comes out, is that they go back and forth between these extreme emotions about people. So they're either having totally intense positive feelings about someone, or they're having extremely negative feelings about someone, and they kind of like go back and forth in between them.
And the last one we have on our list here is they are insecure when they are apart.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that in general, we can say they're just insecure.
But as far as their connection with you, their attachment to you is gone when you are not there.
Yeah, well, it's an abnormal attachment for sure. A lot of people say that maybe it resembles anxious avoidant. I kind of feel like narcissistic attachment maybe should be given its own category. But yeah, I mean, there can be this sort of idea that they don't have the same object constancy as normal people.
Can you explain that term to me?
Yeah, so that's sort of like a part of early childhood development where babies learn that objects still exist even though they're not within sight. And, that can be affected if there's trauma in early childhood development. I think that is a possibility it's a possible explanation for some of that behavior. But I also think that narcissists are, a lot of times, very like sophisticated in their development. It's just that they don't actually feel a connection, like a real genuine connection to other people the way that normal people do. And then that's sort of why they just always need supply. And so it doesn't matter who it is. If there is potential supply that's in their proximity, they'll go towards that, and they're not going to have loyalty to whoever is, not there in the moment.
And thus why they cheat a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So now that we've gone through that list, we're going to kind of discuss if you are currently in a relationship with a narcissist, or you might be just getting into a relationship and don't know who you're dealing with or kind of what's going on, and you happen to stop by this show and you're listening to this today. We're kind of just going to discuss a few things, maybe 4 or 5 things. That's more than a few. How to get someone to show their true selves. So, number 1, we have asking for empathy. Can you explain how this one works?
Well, as we know, narcissists are lifelong imitators of normal empathy. They're really, really good at appearing like they're doing it, at least on the surface. They're good at faking it. And that's like sort of what they're doing when they're trying to love bomb. They're trying to, sort of mask they don't have a normal sense of empathy. So you can sort of run an empathy test if your gut intuition is telling you empathy, the connection, there's something that's not quite right. You can sort of run tests like asking for empathy around hard experiences during your day and just seeing what happens. And generally, if this is a narcissistic person, they're going to be very bored by this kind of interaction where they're required to have empathy, and that obviously won't be able to do it. I can remember in the early phase of my main narcissistic partner, I didn't know that I was doing this, but I ran an empathy test, and basically I had received a health diagnosis, and I went to him for some consolation, and what ensued was not exactly what I expected, and I ended up trying to end the relationship, and obviously wasn't successful because I was codependent, and I still had more to do there. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting idea to kind of try to get a sense of how genuine our connections with them are.
And also, just to remind people to do this after, I guess, a love bombing phase, because during the love bombing phase, they might be kind of gung ho. So kind of, for this one, I guess you kind of have to wait a little. But for the next one, you don't, which is saying, it's very simple, saying no.
Yeah, just trying to place the boundary. And seeing what happens. And obviously with these kinds of like boundary and empathy testing, you want to do it in a way that's safe. To definitely, use your wisdom on that. But this is another area of BPD overlap as well, because borderline personality people in this overlap with covert narcissism, they don't react well to boundaries because they perceive that as a rejection. And they are likely to have an adverse reaction and sometimes a tantrum, and it can be followed by threats and just bringing you into a whole kind of big conflict. So it's definitely a really big sign.
It's something I wish I did very early on, instead of always being, I guess the word is compliant. Is that the proper word there? To kind of everything, saying no or just setting a boundary. It seems so simple, but we have such a hard time doing it.
Yeah. And coverts, they're kind of masters of like not letting you set boundaries. Like the boundary setting is one of the things that they want to just eradicate.
Or you're just having such a good time. No just doesn't become part of your vocabulary. It just kind of disappears.
Right. Yeah.
And up next on our list of how to get a narcissist to show their true self, ask about their ex.
Oh, yeah. It's actually really interesting, narcissists' ideas about their exes. And there's like two, it's sort of two orientations, I think. So one is all my ex-girlfriends or boyfriends, they're all crazy, or they have like a harem of their exes. And so, it just varies. It's definitely a red flag if someone is saying every single person that they ever dated, it was crazy.
But it still seems like they can be friends with an ex, but that is, when I listen to a lot of stories recently, especially when it comes to, Michael Jackson, and it comes to his type of abuse, where you have the famous people who he was friends with, such as like Macaulay Culkin, say, oh, he never did anything to me. He in reality, most likely, I'm not saying he was guilty or not, but in these situations, they have those one or two people that say, oh, this person never did anything wrong. And because of who they are, you think that they're a good person. But at the same time, they're a form of supply in one way, but also a way to show that they are normal. And it's a kind of a way, like a little trick. So if they have like the best friend that is still a part of their life, but they also have exes that are, that are terrible, a big red flag.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think what to look out for here is whether they're doing it in extremes. So it's like if they have to vilify everyone who they ever broke up with, it's emotionally imbalanced. And then also if they need adoration from people so badly that they're going to kind of keep everyone in orbit around them, that's another huge red flag.
So now we have one more to go, and this one's on the more controversial level. So it's a warning. This is not always to be used. It all depends on the situation and the safety of where you are in your relationship. And that is when it comes to pushing a narcissistic injury button.
Yeah. So, I mean, and you'll have to kind of suss out what would be the narcissistic injury for every narcissist. But if you, generally with a covert narcissist, if you give a little pushback on their position as victim, it's likely to be the narcissistic injury. But you can also ask about something that they're hiding. So if they're trying to hide like substance abuse, but you found some alcohol bottles in the closet or under the dresser, and then you confront about that can hit the narcissistic injury button. If the person is not narcissistic, then they'll be able to have like a fair and balanced conversation that is probably challenging for them, but it won't result in rage, denial, gaslighting, and punishment afterwards, right?
All right. And that brings a close to those questions. But now we have our audience questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. Audience question 1. It's not that I don't trust others after my relationship. It's that I don't trust my decision-making process anymore. How can I trust myself going forward to not be tricked again?
Yeah, I totally get that one because fundamentally this all comes back to us and our relationship with ourselves. So if you're not able to trust what your decision-making process has been, then that means that you're having issues trusting yourself. And that means that you need to go in and do some healing work, and you need to understand what your vulnerabilities are and what the needs are that you have that are being met through these toxic relationships. And that's really important. We need to understand what these patterns are because something is playing out over and over. And I definitely recommend working with a professional to find out why that's happening. But there's also lots of books on the topic, like you could read about transactional analysis or the drama triangle, for instance. I think what you're likely to find is that it's linked to early childhood experiences that have set you up for codependent behavior. But getting to the bottom of that is really crucial in healing your ability to trust yourself.
And question 2, I've heard that narcissistic abuse is like an addiction. Are there any strategies for detaching from my abuser?
Yeah, it is absolutely like an addiction. That's actually how the trauma bond functions because it kind of hijacks your neurochemistry. And, you know, it creates basically a cycle where you're depleted in neurotransmitters when you're going down. And then when you sort of like get the hit, the neurotransmitters, they all come back in a very intense way. So it sets us up for depletion and deficiencies. But so it's actually for this reason really difficult to leave a narcissist, right? Like everyone says, go no contact, but it's super hard. I mean, it's really, really hard. It's like quitting a drug. So I definitely recommend like give yourself some compassion around this because you might not be able to do it all at once. So go no contact, but if you can't do it, just do reduced contact and start placing boundaries around yourself to create some distance and just kind of like gradually amp up that distance. With substance addiction, most addicts will relapse multiple times before they actually achieve sobriety. So just trust that it's a process. And if you really want them out of your life, it will happen. But yeah, there's that. So you could do gray rock as another sort of like tactic for putting some distance. You can try to fill your life with some things that are more positive. So find something meaningful to focus on, like get a dog, or focus on your kids, your friends, your work. Create something new to focus on if you can. If it's a narcissistic partner, you can try dating others. And, obviously, like, it's not going to seem that appealing because you're addicted to the narcissist, but just kind of be open to the possibility that you can meet up with other people or talk to people on dating apps and just start to put like one foot in front of the other. And then the last I would say is that you need to address trauma in your body. So you need to address this maybe in therapy with movement. Some people even have to, because of the ups and downs in neurotransmitters and the subsequent depletion, you might have to, with your therapist's advice, sometimes people are going on antidepressants to address that. And, just in general, healing your codependency.
And the next question we have, I thought I was over my abuser and moved on, but then he showed up in my dream. It really set me back. Was that something random, or is this still bothering me deep that I'm not I read that wrong. I thought I was, or I wrote it down wrong. I thought I was over my abuser and moved on, but then he showed up in my dream. It really set me back. Was that something random, or is this still something that's bothering me deep that I'm not dealing with?
I love this question because I love everything that deals with the subconscious.
And this happens to everyone.
Yeah, I want to say dreaming about an ex is extremely common. Doesn't matter like if they were toxic or not. It's a lot of people have that experience. It is likely that it doesn't have everything to do with your ex or like what's going on with your ex. A big thing with dreams is that the context of the dream is a big factor in determining what it means. So, you have to think about how you felt about the dream, like what you felt it meant inside the dream. Look at the context of your life situation, and you can maybe put together what it's more about. It's likely something deeper. So if you're feeling like that ex showed up in your dream because there's something you need to deal with in regards to that ex, then I actually believe that that's probably likely what's going on. And then I think in general, if you want to look even deeper, I actually work with coaching clients on this. You can keep a dream journal for a period of time, like a month, and just track all the dreams that you have. And you're going to see that there's emerging patterns in that time frame. And it's quite an obvious message that can emerge that's super interesting.
And the last question. I want to expose everything my ex-narcissist did to me to all his friends and family. It's consuming me. I just can't get over it. I feel like I have to move to another city because running into people we both know is just too high a probability, and seeing the places we hung out at just hurts. Everything hurts. How do I stop myself from making all-around rash decisions? I feel like I'm reacting to everything and I have no control. I
empathize with this questioner so much because I can really feel in this message, like this description of pain and like being inflamed, like everything hurts right now. And I think this is absolutely a trauma response. So it doesn't surprise me that you're a little bit alarmed right now, and you might think that your behavior might become rash because you are in a trauma response right now. So the thing is that when we're right there, we have the capacity to do a lot of damage to ourselves. And it's exactly where the narcissist wanted to put you. It's a total setup. So, I want to say if you're tempted to act rash, you're actually in like the flight or the fight response, which is pretty much, it's better than just freezing in the situation. It means that you're willing to take some action for yourself. But it's also really important to not react right away. So you want to create some distance for yourself. And, you know, we talked about some creative ways to do that. Obviously it can be a little harder right now with the COVID-19 situation. But I also think like dropping out of your social group and spending more time outdoors or something like that, just for a period of time while you are addressing the trauma in your body or working with a therapist, you want to kind of give yourself that distance and give yourself time before you make decisions if you're not feeling like you're likely to make good ones right now.
Well, Elizabeth, I want to thank you for answering all of these questions and discussing covert narcissism and narcissists today on the show. So before we leave, tell everyone where they can reach you and some last words for everyone, positive stuff during this time.
Sure. So I have some announcements about my coaching practice. I am doing a live series, which is going to be a live class with me every evening. I live in London, so I'm on British time, so 6 p.m. London time, April 27th through May 1st. And you can go to my website and sign up for this. I'm at elizabethbarrecoaching.com. I'm also launching group coaching right now, so there's a wait list that's on the website as well. And I'm giving discounted sessions and coaching packages during COVID-19. So if you're worried about finances right now, I'm giving 20% off. And if that still doesn't meet your needs, go ahead and email me and tell me what your situation is, and we can work something out. And then, you know, obviously follow me on Instagram. It's a great way to kind of keep in touch with me and my content.
And you can be found at ElizabethBarre_coaching on Instagram. I'll have all of this stuff in the description of the show, so you can just click on it. Yeah. And I just want to thank you once again for being on the show. This is your third time on the show, and being with me today. It's always a delight to talk to you and talk about this stuff. We could talk all day. And for everyone else out there who is listening, I hope you have a good night.